Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to the Season Keepers, the show where the only two people we recommend keeping for the season is us. My name's Matt, aka Clean Sheet Wipeout.
My name's James, aka FPL Drug.
How you doing, mate?
Yeah, not too bad. Obviously, still trying to digest the final, but aren't we all?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, we've just done a Euros 2020 review, so for all those people that are tuning into this, if you fancy hearing our thoughts on the Euros, then feel free to go back and have a listen to that one. But this one's a little bit of a special podcast. Not only is it the second of our FPL series, so if you want to go back, we've done a FPL kind of prices review podcast to start the season. This one, on the other hand, is not only going out on our own platforms, on Twitter, audio, YouTube, but thanks to Sudge and James over at Planet FPL, as part of their Takeover week, we are probably now in the ears of a lot more Planet FPL subscribers. So welcome, guys, to the Season Keepers. If you enjoy what we do, then we'd absolutely love for you to give us a follow over on Twitter at Season Keepers. We also have a YouTube channel that you could subscribe to. And if you like my voice in particular, you'll probably hear it, excuse me, a little bit more over the season because, as James announced earlier on, I'm the new Southampton correspondent, and I'm incredibly thankful to be given that opportunity and can't wait to talk more to you guys. But enough about me and enough about James. We're for this podcast, I think what we've decided to do is, rather than look at the fixtures throughout the entirety of the season, a lot of us like to look at the fixtures early on, build a team, and if it's not going well, we can wildcard out of it. So what we've decided is we're going to do a podcast on the first 6 fixtures only, and we're also going to note them against the exact same corresponding fixtures from last season. So we'll give you the stats on goals scored, goals against, kind of points gained, and we'll also, run through our opinions on how good or bad the first 6 fixture runs are. So do you think that sounds all right, James?
It certainly does.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've got a fixture ticker in front of us that we've created, and we've got all the stats there. So should we get going? We're going to do this alphabetically, I think makes sense.
Cool.
Right, I'll let you jump in first then. Do you want to cover Arsenal?
Yeah. Obviously, a good first game for Arsenal against Brentford. But sometimes when a promoted side obviously comes up, they surprise a few people. So might not be as easy as we think for Arsenal that first game. And then after that, they've got 2 difficult games in Chelsea and Man City.
They do.
So I don't know. I feel over the period of those 3 games, I don't fancy them. But then obviously they've got Norwich, Burnley, and then the derby against Spurs as the game week 6. Overall, it's okay. Are the fixtures for Arsenal, but I think there's 3 games there where I don't fancy Arsenal's chances.
Yeah, not at all. And if I come on to the stats from last season, so obviously they're facing 2 promoted teams, as well as 4 that they played last season. In those 4 games, surprisingly, they actually picked up 7 points, which took me by surprise when I was looking at the stats. They managed to score 6 and they conceded 4. So given the fact that they play Spurs, Chelsea and Man City, the stats from last season are quite telling that these games are still quite tight with Arsenal. And with Arteta having another season behind him, I'm expecting it to be quite similar. Albeit, for me personally, I won't be touching Arsenal assets until at least game week 4 because of those 2 horrible fixtures in game weeks 2 and game week 3.
Yeah, I mean, Arteta did tactically quite well last season in terms of the way he set his team up for those big games. But yeah, same as you, I don't think I'm going to be looking at anyone. I mean, the one player I like from Arsenal is Saka, and obviously he's played a lot of minutes in the Euros. So I think, game week 4 would be a good time to bring him in.
Agreed. The player I'm going to be keeping an eye on will be Pepe. If he can bring the end of last season's form into the start of this season, then I may well look to maybe jump on him for that Norwich game in game week 4. But yeah, staying well away from Arsenal to start with. Right, do you want to jump on to Villa, mate?
Yep. For me, one of the better runs out of the 20 teams. I think it's a great first three fixtures. You got Watford, Newcastle, and Brentford. I think it doesn't really get much better than that. You've got obviously two promoted teams, and then Newcastle obviously aren't the best. So, and Villa have bought well in the summer. They've bought obviously Buendia, great talent. We spoke on the last pod how we fancy him and Watkins at the prices they've been set at.
Absolutely.
I mean, Watkins against his old team as well, Brentford.
Yeah.
Could go off.
It could do, and yeah, if they keep on a Grealish as well, like that three could be unbelievable to load up on.
Definitely, and I'll probably hold them even through those tougher last three fixtures of Chelsea, Everton, Man U. I think if you've got the squad, you could maybe bench a Buendia or whoever for those games, but I'd probably end up playing them, to be honest.
Yeah, I think there's a decision to be made because I'm probably in the opposite end of that debate. I think if you're loading up personally on Aston Villa to start with, say you start with three, ideally I'd probably only want one of them come game week 4 when they go into Chelsea away, Everton at home, Man United away. And someone like Buendia could be ideal because, you know, he's capable of attacking returns. He's a very sharp player, but he's not too pricey. Whereas maybe someone like Watkins, there are alternatives in his price bracket that you could move on to that maybe have better fixture swings. So that's something to keep an eye on. And then again, looking at last season's stats, two promoted teams. So obviously 4 games to view. They picked up 5 points from those 4 games, Newcastle, Chelsea, Everton and Man United. I think that's a pretty decent return, to be fair, for Villa. Only scored 4 goals in those 4 games, but then only conceded 3. And we all know, you know, Emi Martinez won the Copa America, didn't he? So he's got himself a trophy there. Finally got Leo Messi, one of those international trophies. But I think even though we spoke about it on the last pod that he's 5.5 million, I think a lot of people will still go for him. And he's probably the type of keeper that could scrape them the points in those big games, even if it's, you know, a 0-0 draw, and pick up a bunch of save points. Right, let's move on to the first of those promoted teams then, mate, and jump on Brentford.
Yep, it's an okay run. First game, obviously, as we mentioned before, against Arsenal, then Crystal Palace, Villa, Brighton, Wolves, and Liverpool. I think if you're gonna punt on Brentford, you're probably just gonna punt on one man, and that obviously being Tony at 6.5 million. I think 2 would be a very ballsy thing to do, and I don't expect many people to do it.
No.
Maybe in terms of price, maybe someone goes and gets a Brentford defender. But for me, I think at most I'll be doing Tony.
I've seen quite a few drafts around. I mean, I've barely looked at my draft, to be fair. I've been focused on the Euros, so FPL's kind of been second at the back of the mind at the moment. But yeah, I think a lot of people have Tony. I've seen quite a few people punting on Mbeumo because obviously occasionally played, I guess, out of position, you know, up with Tony. So that's an interesting one to keep an eye on. And like you said, you've mentioned that Arsenal fixture. I think what's key about the fact that they play Arsenal, they play them at home. And it's the first game back where we're going to be allowed a crowd, touch wood. Obviously, July the 19th has come in. The government is still standing by the fact that they're basically getting rid of most, you know, COVID protocols. And with that comes the opportunity to get back to watching live football. The crowd at Brentford are going to be so behind that team when they step out on that pitch against Arsenal. I genuinely think it could be one of those first game week shocks.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I hadn't really considered the return of the crowds. Yeah, it would not surprise me.
Yeah, I think it's the return of the crowds is going to be huge, and the fact that some of these teams have very good home games, like Watford, we'll come on to later. Again, promoted club, have a home game. It's going to make a difference for me. And yeah, some of these stats that we review might be a little bit skewed because they were played in empty grounds, but I think we might get back to the fact that home games have far more of an impact on results this season, particularly as we've not been at football for 18 months, other than those that were lucky enough to get to the Euros. It's going to be mad.
Yeah, I think that's a good point because, like, in my thinking towards the end of last season, I almost took the home and away aspect out of my thinking.
Same.
Whereas now, it in theory, it should definitely have an impact. It will have not just an impact on the players, but also the referees.
Yeah, agreed. I think we have to get back to reminding ourselves that home and away games actually make a difference. Right, let's jump on to Brighton Hove Albion, and for me, actually have quite a nice run to start with.
Yeah, agreed. I think like the toughest game they've got there is Leicester, if not maybe Everton. Other than that, they've got a very very decent run of sort of Burnley, Watford, Brentford, Crystal Palace.
Yeah.
I find Brighton so hard to predict, though. I do not know what to expect from them.
No, I won't be going near them going forward, like attacking wise, but I may be on the double up defensively. I think Sanchez at 4.5 million is too good to turn down, and I may well punt on one of their defenders as well. I just think that those first 6 games, if Brighton can get off to a good start and be defensively solid, as we've seen that they can be, you could be easily talking 2 or 3 clean sheets in those first 6 games.
Yeah, and at 4.5 million for the keeper, it's not even a risk.
No, exactly. And I think even the stats from last season kind of back up how tight these games are. So obviously they've got 2 promoted teams in the first 6. But in the 4 games played, they only picked up 3 points. They only scored 3 goals, but they only conceded 4. And 4 across 4 games, you know, it's not a lot if you count the fact that Everton and Leicester are in there. And Leicester in particular are a very good side. So yeah, for me, Brighton are definitely ones to look at. Whereas the next club, not so much in terms of defensive assets for what I think is probably one of the worst starts you could have asked for.
Yeah, agreed. I don't think it gets much worse than this. The first game's obviously okay at Brighton, but then you've got the likes of Liverpool, Leeds, Everton, Arsenal, and Leicester, and yeah, it doesn't fill you with confidence. You don't want a Burnley defender for that.
No.
I'm not even sure if you want any Burnley players for that. If I'm honest,
I will be very surprised to see any Burnley player above 5-10% ownership at the start of the season. Some of them may be dead teams. You know, people play zombie teams, as we know. We keep that a little bit quiet, but people do, and you might find the odd Burnley player in there. But yeah, it's horrific, and the stats kind of back it up as well. So last season, obviously, all 6 are Premier League teams. They did surprisingly pick up 5 points, which took me a little bit by surprise. They scored 6, but they conceded 12. And just looking at that, like Leeds, I think are going to improve again. Liverpool have to improve. I think Arsenal should be fit and firing hopefully by, you know, game week 5. It's like we mentioned, it's when we're probably likely to start targeting Arsenal. And then Leicester. I think just everyone in there, I think, are going to go better this season, and that could spell trouble for Burnley. Chelsea, I guess, are the next club. And again, for me, a really tricky run to start with.
it is. However, they are Chelsea.
Yeah.
So I'd feel a lot more confident, even though it's very similar to kind of run of fixtures. Obviously, they're a much better team than Burnley. They'll be on a high from winning the Champions League.
Oh, absolutely.
They're going to be confident. I think, obviously, Havertz has had a season to bed in. I think he's going to step it up this season. I'm pretty sure he's in my draft. If he isn't, then I'm going to try and fit him in.
Yeah.
And Yeah, I fancy them in some of these games. Maybe even against City. Why not? I mean, they beat them in the Champions League final. They completely nullified them. I don't see why they can't do that to the other teams in this run, which is sort of Palace, Arsenal, Liverpool, Villa, Tottenham. I fancy them to win most of those games, actually.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a tricky one. It'll be a decision is to be made on which Chelsea assets you do start with. Like you said, Havertz, I think he's going to be quite popular. He's pricey, but I think he'll be worth it. Defensively for Chelsea, we know how resolute they can be. And I mean, against the likes of Palace, even Arsenal away, Villa, Spurs, they could very well keep 3-4 clean sheets if they're really at it. And it'll be picking the right defensive asset that hopefully we don't see rotated, because we know that they're prone to, particularly wing backs, they were towards the end of last season rotating quite heavily. I don't expect that at the start of the season. So if we can maybe get a grip on who they're really playing pre-season wise, it might be worth keeping an eye on. The only thing to obviously consider is there might be people loading up on like Mason Mount, for instance. I think staying away from those England boys and those that got towards the latter stages of the tournament, even like Jorginho, it wouldn't surprise me to see them maybe miss out in that first week.
No, that's a fair point. I think, luckily for me, I think the ones I'm considering sort of exited earlier in the tournaments, obviously Havertz, Germany. But yeah, it's worth considering if you're thinking, oh, that's a good fixture against Palace on the opening day. Yeah, Mason Mount why not play that game?
No. But looking stats wise, obviously 6 games, they did pick up 8 points last season. So like you said, you can definitely see points in these. They did score 9 and only conceded 7. So I'd actually probably put money on them conceding less goals than 7 this time round in those first 6 games.
Agreed.
Jumping on to the next team, and they are the first of our new manager teams. So obviously it is now Patrick Vieira's Crystal Palace.
Yeah, I mean we know nothing about Patrick Vieira's Crystal Palace. So
No.
to be honest, yeah, I think the fixture difficulty almost goes out the window till we know what we're looking at with Palace. Yeah. If they impress against Chelsea, then yeah, maybe those next 5 games after that are worth considering. Obviously, after that tough game against Chelsea, they've got Brentford at home, very good fixture. So yeah, so if their new signing performs, why not chuck him in? I think you got Tyreek Mitchell at 4.5. Obviously, PVA's out the picture, released. He's out the picture for Palace, so Mitchell becomes an option. Obviously, loves some bonus points. Loves an assist. Obviously, even scored, I think, at the end of last season. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what Patrick Vieira's Palace play like, to be honest.
It does, yeah, and it's quite a tricky run, to be fair, isn't it? It's Chelsea away, Brentford at home, you got West Ham away, Spurs at home, Liverpool away, and then Brighton at home in that 6th game. And it is worth noting that a lot of these players that went out of contract at the end of last season, quite a few of them have said that they're willing to sit down and talk with Palace to negotiate new contracts. So obviously now that Vieira's been signed, those discussions can take place. So I wouldn't rule out the fact that Van Aanholt isn't a Palace player, because he could well be come the start of the season.
Interesting.
But yeah, for me, it's going to be a tricky one. Obviously, they signed the Reading lad, didn't they? What's his name?
I think it's Elise.
Elise, yeah, Michael Elise from Reading, very big talent. I think having a front line of Eze, Zaha, and Elise, albeit we know that Eze is out for much of the start of the season, which is incredibly unfortunate. But they've got such a youthful, pacey front line now that I'm excited by Palace when they have a fit and firing squad, particularly, when Vieira's maybe had a stamp. And I don't particularly know much about his style of play. I know that he was out in New York and he was obviously associated with Man City, so it's worth keeping an eye on. But yeah, Palace will be in my mind, and they'll be very much on my watch list. And fixture-wise, last season, obviously they played one promoted team to start with, but they only picked up 3 points from the 5 games, only scored 3 and conceded 9. So it is a tricky start on paper. Moving on then to the second of our new manager teams, and a surprising one. It's Benitez's Everton.
I think it's a great run for Everton here at the start of the season. I mean, when you're saying the hardest games they've got are Villa and Leeds, that's when you know they've got a really good run.
They do.
I mean, firstly, they start against us
at home as well. I'm not looking forward to that.
That's 3 points and a clean sheet for them. Then they've got Leeds, which will be a good game. I'll probably watch that game, to be honest.
I expect it to be one of the televised easily. Yeah,
it should be if it isn't. Brighton, Hove Albion, and Burnley after that. Villa, then Norwich. I mean, that's a great run. I mean, Luca Digne at 5.5 as well. I mean, I mentioned him last week on the pod, and coupled with these fixtures, I think it's a no-brainer for me. Yeah, no, I agreed, and I think Benitez would be smiling when he saw those first 6 fixtures. You know, I think it gives him a bit of a chance to stamp the way that he wants them to set up. I think there's some very good fixtures to target there. And the likes of, say, Calvert-Lewin, I know he's been at the Euros, but he hasn't really played. So it's not like he's going to be unfit. And I think with the World Cup coming next year, he's experienced getting to the final with the squad. I think he'll quite clearly want to be part of that squad again. And under Benitez, I can see, DCL doing big things this season. I think statistically, looking at it, see 5 games Premier League teams last season, picked up 8 points. So, like you said, it's definitely targetable. However, I'm fully expecting these next 2 stats to change because they only scored 4 goals in those 5 games and they conceded 3. So very tight, low scoring affairs. I'm expecting, hopefully, Everton to score a few more goals this season. Yeah, I mean, I think they could score 4 goals in one of those games, one of those easy fixtures. Yeah, if they get going, absolutely. The next team, which I think we all love to jump on, and albeit tricky-ish on paper, I think we're all going to have at least 1, maybe 2 of their players to start the season, and that team is Leeds. Yeah, you see with Leeds, they're one of those teams where even if they do have a tough fixture, I still feel quite hopeful. Yeah. I mean, I think they enjoy being an underdog, and often that's when they can sometimes be at their best. Agreed. They can give a strong side a test from their level of fitness and the amount of pressing they do. Yeah, they can always stop them from playing their game. Yeah, well, obviously the first 6 fixtures, you've got Man United away, which they'll be praying that they don't get a repeat of the result that they had Old Trafford last season. It was 6-2. Then obviously Everton at home, Burnley away, Liverpool at home, Newcastle away, West Ham at home. I think it's quite a tidy set of fixtures aside from obviously Man United and Liverpool there. They'll potentially give Burnley and Newcastle an absolute hiding if they're on their day. And last season, I think the stats just show how unpredictable Leeds are. They picked up 7 points. They scored 11, but they conceded 12, albeit 6 of those were against Man United. So in the other 5 fixtures, they've only conceded 6 goals. So I think that is definitely where, for me, looking at stats is one thing, but it is always worth delving a little bit deeper. And when I saw that, I immediately just thought, oh wait, that Man United game was an exceptional game on TV. I'll just quickly double check the score. And yeah, half of the goals that they conceded in these 6 games came in 1. So that's where it skews it a little bit, but I still think it's definitely worth noting.
jumping on then to a team that once again I'm expecting big things. They've made a couple of very good signings, in my opinion, in this window, which we spoke about on the Prices pod. And I think since we've done that, Bertrand is signed on a free transfer to Leicester now. A good kind of backup alternative, in my opinion. I don't think he'll be a regular starter, but they play Wolves at home, West Ham away, Norwich away, Man City at home, Brighton away, and then Burnley at home.
Yeah, I think that's a fairly good run. I mean, if you don't fancy them against the City game, you could bench the players you've brought in for them. Fixture wise, it would not put me off at all.
No, I think with me, the only thing with Leicester, and we spoke about it previously, was the fact that I think it's going to be tricky to pick which forward and which midfielder you want to go for, because with the Champions League football coming up as well, we could see rotation, and that could be a problem. So, oh wait, it's not Champions League, it's Europa, isn't it, that they qualified for?
You're rubbing it in now.
Well, sorry, I just genuinely no, but that's even worse because it's Thursday, Sundays. So in terms of rotation, I think we're going to see a lot. I'm not sure I'll go near their forwards. I think Vardy is too expensive, as we've spoken about before. And then we're likely to see rotation for that other spot now that they've got at least two players vying for it. Plus Harvey Barnes is going to be back. Madison should be fit. It's a tricky one to call.
Yeah, even with these fixtures, I'm not sure I actually fancy any of their players.
It's tough.
Maybe Fofana at the back just because of how cheap he is.
4.5 million is an absolute steal.
Yeah, aside from him, I think there's no one that really screams out. They don't really get me that excited.
No.
You know what I mean?
No, I agreed. Yeah, completely agree. And stats wise, they picked up 9 points. They did score 9 goals from the 5 games and conceded 8. So it's a team worth considering. But yeah, I think for me, I'll probably only be on Fofana, and that is purely because of his price. However, the next team, I am expecting far bigger and better things this season, particularly obviously with the return of Virgil van Dijk. Of course, we're talking about Liverpool.
Yeah, saw a photo of him in training, looking strong. 6.5, I think if you want a Liverpool defender, that maybe will get an attack in return. I actually fancy him over Robbo and Trent for the 1 million less. I think. I mean, yeah, you could get two clean streaks straight off the bat, Norwich and Burnley.
It's tidy, isn't it?
It's a good start for them. Chelsea, obviously their toughest game, but then they've got Leeds, Palace, and Brentford. So potentially more clean sheets in there. I'd like to see an improvement on their defensive performances last season, but maybe that's because of the absence of the big man.
Yeah, agreed. I genuinely think a lot of people will be doubling up on Liverpool defensively. And I briefly looked at a draft today where I had both Van Dijk and Trent in there, because I know Trent's 7.5 million, and we did speak about before, maybe a little bit overpriced, but if he gets clean sheets on top of those attacking returns, and clean sheets were missing last season, if he gets them, he's going to be potentially hitting another 200-point season, and 7.5 million for a 200-point season is unbelievable value. And looking at the fixtures, they play 2 promoted teams in that first 6. So I think, it's definitely targetable, both away, which, like we've said about those first away games, that they go away to Norwich to start with. So that could be tricky at Carrow Road. However, last season they picked up 4 points from the 4 games. Don't think that was great. Only scored 3, but only conceded 3. So I'm expecting more goals from Liverpool this season. And if they only concede 3, and those 3 are against Chelsea and Leeds, then you're looking at 4 clean sheets. What do you make of the next set of fixtures then, mate? Manchester City.
I think it's a bit of a mixed bag for Man City. So you got the first game, Tottenham away, not the easiest of games. But then obviously Norwich at home the following game. I imagine most people will be captaining Man City players for that game week. Then you got Arsenal, Leicester, Saints, and then Chelsea. Yeah, I mean, Man City are a quality team, so you expect them to do well in these games. Obviously, Sterling might be a bit fatigued from the Euros. Maybe they'll not play him against Spurs. I mean, Pep, he might even bench him anyway, just out of tactics.
As he does, yeah.
Yeah, we know it's a lottery with City players. But, I mean, I wouldn't write them off in any of these games, to be honest.
No. And there's a reason that I spoke about it in the last pod. But genuinely, if Man City don't sign a forward, and obviously with Sterling going quite all the way in the Euros, I think Ferran Torres is a player that we should not be overlooking. And at $7.5 million, I'm probably at the moment 90% set on that man being in my team come the start of the season.
Yeah, that's a fair shout.
I think stats wise, it's looking good. Like they picked up 12 points from the 5 Premier League games last season, scored 11 and only conceded 5. So yeah, very targetable. As with Man City, it's just about getting on the right players. I think that's the biggest call. And they've got a few English boys in there. Even John Stones, like, is he likely to start centre back with Diaz come the start of the season? We don't know how fatigued he's going to be. So it's definitely worth keeping an eye on, that's for sure.
Great.
Moving on the other side of Manchester, again, in my opinion, a very tidy start. It's Man United.
Yeah, I'm not looking forward to you doing the stat section of this bit. You'll probably guess why when I mention the teams they're playing. So it's Leeds first up, a bit of a derby, that one. And then Southampton, Wolves, Newcastle, West Ham and Villa. So obviously a great set of games from game weeks 2, 3 and 4, I think.
Yeah.
Like, that's a very good. You fancy that United scoring probably every one of those games.
I mean, that Leeds home game was 6-2 last season. So
even the Leeds game itself on the first day. So for those first 4 games, maybe a Marcus Rashford or a Jadon Sancho could be someone.
I think Sancho could definitely be an option.
I mean, he hardly obviously got used at the Euros, so that isn't going to be a problem with him.
No, exactly. And Cavani, could be a very useful option come the start. Rashford, it's worth noting, is having an operation post the Euros. So I think he's likely to miss the first couple of weeks at least.
Right.
So, that probably brings in the likes of Greenwood, for instance, to maybe get regular minutes come the start of the season. And like you've said, the stats wise, they picked up the full 18 points from these games last season. They scored 19. I know 6 of them were against Leeds at home, but 19 goals and then only conceded 8. It's unbelievable. Like, if Man United can get off to a start like that, genuine title contenders, in my opinion.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, great addition with Sancho. I mean, they're looking at other players as well. You can't write them off.
Yeah, I mean, defensively, I think they're looking at a few signings, aren't they? So I think Man United could be dark horses if Ole gets it right this season. On the other side, however, a team that I do worry about, and we might even do a potential pod later in the season, is a bit of a special in an international break. It's Newcastle.
Yeah, so I mean, the run isn't terrible. It's West Ham, Villa, Southampton, United, Leeds and Watford. I mean, it's just that Newcastle team that doesn't fill me with confidence. Obviously, the fans aren't behind the manager, which makes all the board, obviously, which makes there's a bit of tension there.
Exactly.
So I mean, West Ham were great last season. Villa, they've strengthened.
Yep.
Saints, yeah, maybe they might be able to give us a game.
I mean, they beat us with 9 men last season, so why not with 11?
Yeah, exactly. I don't obviously fancy them against United, Man United, but
Or Leeds.
yeah, or Leeds, and maybe even Watford might beat them. But we'll just have to see how that one goes. But yeah, I don't think anybody's going to be looking at Newcastle players.
Not to start with, no. I think Callum Wilson will inevitably become an option at some point in the season. He always is, if he's fit. But yeah, for me, I'm staying well away from Newcastle to start with. Last season, they did pick up 6 points from the 5 Premier League games, scored 8 and conceded 11. So it's hit and miss. But yeah, with everything that's gone on at Newcastle and continues to go on, for me, no. And they're one of those teams that I still worry about because of the things that are going on behind the scenes. I think that could be another distraction this season and one that they don't need. The next team, just looking at these first 4 fixtures, I think it's horrific. They've just got promoted. Norwich. What do you think?
Yeah. It's a baptism of fire, this one.
Oh, God.
I mean, you could pick a worse start. It wouldn't be much different. Home against Liverpool, away at Man City, home to Leicester, away at Arsenal. And then finally, they get to breathe and have a game home against Watford before finishing up with an away tie at Everton. It's an extremely tough run for them.
It's harsh.
But I guess to some degree, the expectations will be lowered.
Yeah,
there won't be so much pressure on them to get any results. Anything they get out of this is going to be a bonus, really.
It is a fair point, and it gets it out of the way, doesn't it, to start with? I mean, if they can have, even if they have 1, maybe 2 points on the board, come playing Watford in game week 5, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Norwich fans, but I'd see that as a success with the 4 games that you start with. If you're going to have any points on the board, it's a little bit of a confidence boost. You've picked up points against teams that no one expects Norwich to pick up points against, to then hopefully propel them into that Watford game with a bit of confidence, a bit about them, and think, all right, this is massive. Like, if we can get, 3 points on the board here, it's a solid platform to start with in the first 5 games. If you can have 5 points from 5 games, I think that's great for Norwich from these 5 games.
Oh, definitely. I mean, who knows? Maybe Timo Pukki will surprise us, score against Liverpool, score against City.
Yeah, we'll all be on a Pukki party again.
Exactly. We'll see that horrendous gif.
God. Oh, God, yeah. Do we have to talk about the next team? I'm really not looking forward to talking to James about this on Planet FPL when we do Correspondence Week. But obviously that team is Southampton.
Yeah, it's not a fantastic run. It's pretty tricky. So Everton away, Man United at home, Newcastle away, West Ham at home, City away, and then Wolves at home. So obviously Norwich have got a worse run than that, but it's not easy either. I mean, I don't expect any points out of the first 2.
No.
The games I feel like we could get something out of, maybe Newcastle, Wolves, maybe get a draw at West Ham if we're lucky. But I don't feel confident, not just in these first 6 games, but for the entire season, to be honest.
Neither do I. And obviously with the news that we spoke about in the last pod about Danny Ings not signing a contract and wanting to test himself at a higher level again, if he's not with us come the start of the season, I'm nervous. And just looking at the stats from last season, I mean, it can't really get any worse. I mean, it could. We could have 0 points, but we picked up 1 point from these 6 games last season. Scored 7, but conceded 14. And that's just not good enough.
Agreed.
I'm scared, but we'll come on to that. I'll obviously talk a lot more with James on Correspondence Week about my opinions on Saints, and inevitably me and you will have our own opinions on Saints before the start of the season as well. So we'll move on, and let's talk about Spurs, Nuno Espirito Santo.
Yep, quite keen to see how his team is going to look. His Spurs team, obviously, Doherty might even become an option again.
Could be, yeah.
And after the first initial tough game against Man City, they've got a fairly good run of Wolves away, Watford at home, Palace away,
Yeah.
Chelsea at home, and then Arsenal away. So it's an okay run of fixtures after the initial first game. I think wouldn't put me off putting Tottenham players in my team.
No, I guess for me, it solely depends on which Tottenham players are still there at the start of the season.
Yeah, very, very, very true. I mean, Harry Kane is so important to that team.
Yeah.
If he's to go, then, I mean, it's going to send a message to the dressing room. Are people then more other big names going to want out? That's the question.
Exactly. Is the transfer window still open come the start of the season? I think it is this year, isn't it? With the Euros having taken place.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah, it genuinely wouldn't surprise me if there is a deal in place for Kane to go to Man City. It would not surprise me if Daniel Levy holds off on allowing that transfer to happen until they've already played Manchester City.
That's the sort of thing he'd do, isn't it?
It really is. He'd get every last penny out of Man City.
Yeah.
Say, you're not having him until game week 2. So he could be there. But yeah, for me, it all depends on the Spurs that we see at the start. I don't think I'm going to start with any Tottenham assets. But maybe by game week 3, if we're seeing a bit of consistency, an approach and style that we enjoy and we think could, convert into points, there's no reason why in game week 3 you can't target that Watford fixture. So yeah, I think looking at the stats, they picked up 5 points. It's 5s across the board. They played 5 Premier League games from these 6. They got 5 points. They scored 5 and they conceded 5. So it's not great on paper, but yeah, for me, game week 3 is probably when I'll start to consider them fixture wise. The last of the new boys then, Watford. What do you make of their start?
First 3 games aren't brilliant. So it's Villa at home, Brighton away, Tottenham away.
Yeah.
But then after that, it doesn't look too bad. So you've got Wolves at home, Norwich away, then Newcastle at home.
Agreed.
And I mean, I saw they've signed Josh King.
Yep.
He's quite cheap. I think he's 5.5 million.
Yeah.
So if he's starting for them, then for a squad player, why not have him in?
Agreed. It could be a very tidy enabler. I think with this fixture turn in game week 4, obviously, like you said, Wolves, Norwich and Newcastle, I think a team like Watford could be the greatest budget enabler possible to allow us to jump on to, say, Arsenal assets, because you could potentially downgrade to a Josh King and then upgrade someone to a Pepe, or downgrade to a Watford defender and then upgrade to an Arsenal defender if it looks like they're playing well. So it's that allowance of keep a little bit of budget aside, but there is the options here to jump on to some of the lesser clubs, even like Brentford. Game week 4, they then go Brighton and Wolves. Like, if we can see a bit of consistency and maybe a couple of players that we quite like that are cheap, it allows you to have that jump. And that's what I'm quite looking forward to. I'll be definitely creating a watch list this season. And I think that could be really useful in finding those moments. And it's all about jumping on the right players at the right time. If you miss the boat, you're often 20 points behind where you should be. So I think that's going to be key. Second last team of the Premier League season, and they are West Ham. What do you make?
I think on the whole, it's a bit of a mixed bag. I think the fixtures wouldn't put me off or particularly draw my attention to them either. But so say if I wanted Antonio on my team, the fixtures wouldn't put me off. I think I'd be quite happy putting him in. I mean, if you think about their start last season, it was quite a difficult run of fixtures, and they performed pretty well.
They did, yeah. Yeah, they did. I think it was the first 8 fixtures last season were horrendous. And they outperformed easily where everybody expected them to be.
Exactly, and they've got Newcastle, Palace, and Saints in this run. So yeah, if you like the look of a West Ham player, put them in.
Yeah, agreed completely. He picked up 11 points from these fixtures last season, so that's not to be sniffed at. They scored 9. They did concede 11, to be fair. They might want to look at being a little bit more defensively tight if they're going to pick up points in some of the bigger games here. But yeah, I don't think they're to be sniffed at. Obviously, at time of recording, they haven't nailed down a contract or a loan extension for Lingard, I don't think. He could be key to how well they start this season. Finally, Wolves, and the fourth of our new managers at time of recording. I believe is it Bruno Lage?
It is, yeah.
I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce his surname, but that's what I'm going to go for. Bruno Lage.
I've had Bruno cider.
Fuck it out. And those are the kind of shitty puns that we're going to get throughout the season, guys. So if you do want to subscribe to us and, follow us on Twitter, if you haven't before, that's what you're going to get all season from James.
They're turning up in their droves now.
Absolutely. Mate, hundreds of followers now. Moving back to the fixtures, what do you make of the start?
First three, similar to Watford, really. Tough first three, Leicester, Tottenham, Man United, but then it clears up a bit. They've got Watford, Brentford and Saints. So I think it's kind of perfect, really, to just see how his team sets up for the first three, see how they're playing, if they're performing well. And then, chuck them in from Gameweek 4.
Agreed, yeah. It's another one of those fixture swings that we've been talking about. And it's definitely one to keep an eye on, given from Gameweek 4, Watford away, Brentford at home, Southampton away. I mean, they're not bad fixtures. And if he's got Wolves playing in a way that we think will provide FPL points, both defensively and going forward. Obviously, Raul Jimenez is back fit, Once they get over that Leicester, Tottenham, Man United, I think a lot of people will be looking at Wolves assets if they're looking lively.
Definitely.
And last season, it was very hit and miss. Obviously, 4 of these are only Premier League games, so they picked up 4 points. They scored 4, conceded 5. It's not great, but we know that Wolves' season last year wasn't particularly great. Injury hit, to be fair. They lost Doherty. They lost Jota at the start of that season, so it was never going to be as good as the 2 seasons prior. But it's interesting that they've made a change of management. Let's give the guy a chance and see how they get on.
Yeah, exactly. It's a fresh start for them.
Absolutely. Well, I'm hoping that everybody's enjoyed that little rundown of our view of the first 6 games. For me, I haven't really looked beyond that personally, because I just kind of wanted to gauge where each team stood to start with and pick up those little kind of switches in and around game week 3 and 4. And if it's going particularly well, that's when you start to look a bit forward, where if it's not gone well for you come these 6 games, reset, take a look at the next 6, maybe look at a wild card and whatnot. That would be my tactic going forward. But I'm just hoping that this style of podcast is what people have enjoyed. And obviously to our regular listeners, thank you for sticking with us. We hope that you've obviously enjoyed the Prices podcast prior. If you haven't listened to that one, go back and listen. Let us know what you think. Let us know if you agree with what we believe to be bargains and what we believe to be overpriced assets that we won't touch. But for this, we thought we'd do a little detailed rundown of our view of the fixtures and go from there.
Yeah, brilliant. I hope you've enjoyed listening to us both. We've known each other for a long time.
We have. Too long. Too long. Yeah, we've known each other, 18 years now?
Yeah, something ridiculous, yeah.
Fucking madness. But just want to end by once again saying thank you to James and Sudge over at Planet FPL for allowing us the opportunity to have your listeners listening to us. And we hope you haven't bored you to death, and you might listen to us again in the future. So to end the pod, I think it's a goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
Cheers, guys.